Shalom, everyone. Shalom, and thank you for joining us again. You're joining the House of Shiloh Ministries as we continue again in our series related to Paul's letters. We are focusing on understanding the audience of Paul's letters. This is part 20, and of course, it's sponsored by the House of Shiloh Ministries, presented by yours truly, Brother Andrew Bradley, also known as Brother Drew. We are in the last part 20. We ended at the beginning of 1 Timothy. All right, so we've gone through quite a bit of the letters of Paul. We've been through many of them. I like Timothy because even though it doesn't state it, Timothy is Hebrew as well, but the way the translations have been used, it's misguiding. But if you pay attention to the text, like we've been saying, you're going to realize the church can't hide everything through manipulations of a word here or there, or here or there. So we're going to continue in Timothy and move right into it. All right, so let's get this show on the road. We are in the second chapter of 1 Timothy, 5 through 7. For there is one Elohim and one mediator between Elohim and men, the man Mashiach Yahusha, who gave himself a ransom for all to be testified in due time. Whereunto I am ordained a preacher and an apostle. I speak the truth in Mashiach and lie not, a teacher of the Gentiles in faith and verity. All right, so one of the curious things when I see verses like this, I like to point out, they say ransom for all. Ransom is a payment that was due to pay a debt, right? That was demanded. The problem is this debt was only in existence due to Torah. So how could he have done it for all men? He did it for all Hebrews, but he could not have done it for all men because the debt or the ransom that was required by Torah was only given to a certain population. So you have to know the fullness of Scripture to understand that is tricky wording. As well as the Gentiles were not taught to pay attention to the small things. We have made it very clear that Yahusha came for his people. We've talked about that throughout these letters. And that the world, and we just got through with that in our previous lesson, that the world in the Gospel of John is only referencing Yasharel. Only Yasharel. So why would they use Gentile wrong here? We proved it over and over again, our points. I'm not just using conjecture. And we've talked about adoption. We talked about inheritance. We talked about the grafted in. We talked about the spiritual Israel. We've done all of that through this lesson. So every angle the church will try to take. But if you look here, why would Paul say a teacher of them? He could have said a teacher to them, a teacher for them. He didn't say that. Of means you came out of them. But we know that Paul says, I am a Hebrew of Hebrews, a Pharisee. He's made it very clear that he's a Hebrew. So how can he say he's of them? Because you got to know the real meaning of Gentile. The real meaning of Gentile is indeed nations. And when he was talking about the nations, he was talking about the nations outside of Yasharel because he was born outside of Yasharel. He was born in one of the Greek colonies up in Turkey, near Turkey. All right, so we have to know some history. We also have to pay attention to the small words, and we have to know the true definition of words and get away with what we've been taught by the Western Church. All right, that's the first slide of the day. Anybody have any adds to this or any questions?
I just want to ask a question. So when the word Gentiles is referring to other nations, you're still talking about the 12 tribes only, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
because Oh, no, that's a good question too, Mr. Tony, because the context helps you see that. You know that he's not talking about other nations because of the context that follows, especially what we're going to talk about in the next slide. Will really, it's right in your faces, and you'll see that the next slide is the perfect example of misusing the word Gentile to try to convince that there's another audience involved. Because Paul is speaking, they're trying to make you think that Paul is talking to non-Israelites, non-Yasharel. But this next verse is going to make it hard to believe. Anybody else?
I think we're good.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Brother, go ahead and read this next verse. 1 Timothy 3:16. Is it? And without controversy, great is the mystery of godliness. Elohim was manifest in the flesh, justified in the spirit, seen of angels, preached unto the Gentiles, believed on in the world, received up into glory. Ooh, thank you, brother. Now, Paul just defined a couple of things in this verse, and you don't even see it. Much of those who read this don't see it. Think about this. He just gave the quote-unquote life cycle of the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, think of it. Let's read it. Yahusha came, he was manifested in the flesh, the word made flesh. He was justified, made righteous by the Ruach HaKodesh. And of course, seen of angels, seen of men, seen of messengers. Was he preached unto the Gentiles? Not according to the Gospels. The Gospels don't do that at all. Not at all. Not according to the definition of Gentile. Believed on in the world. Was he in North America? Alaska? Was he down there on the tips of Chile? Over there kicking it with the Brazilians in the woods? No. I'm pretty sure he gave instructions where to go. That's why he said, do not go to Syria. Right. He even gave his people instructions. So we know the world defined here is Yasharel. So Paul is redefining the word world here in context. Then he was received up to glory. So now this is the crucifixion and death, right? And resurrection is at this point. So he's not talking of history after the crucifixion and resurrection. He's not talking about that. He literally gave the life cycle of Yahusha. So how in the world can we say other nations were talked to? Again, Elohim was manifest in the flesh. You get that from John's first chapter. And justified is to be rendered righteous. Matthew 4:11 says he was seen of angels. You can find that in Matthew 4:11. But it could not be preached unto Gentiles. We know that. He didn't do that. He never did that. And when one of them, who was just a mixed nation, which is the woman at the well, she was actually part Hebrew. All you gotta do is just do the research. We've already talked about that, by the way, because we defined what dog means, because she was called a dog. We defined that in this lesson. If that's the case, he wouldn't even talk to her. So you know he's not going to talk to somebody from other nations because he said he didn't come for them.
Mm-hmm.
So the misuse here is very obvious that this Gentile misuse is purposely done. But the context and the understanding of the Gospels will tell you automatically that the reference of Gentiles in this verse is actually Yasharel.
Mm-hmm.
And this actually proves what Gentile really means. Nations. The nations. This verse is a home run. It's a knockout. If you see it all in its context. And now Paul is over here talking about his ministry, the Yahusha's ministry. So it was even prior to him. So then the Gentiles he speaks of are not non-Hebrews. This is before Paul. since they say Paul is the minister to the Gentiles, even though he said himself he's of them.
Mm-hmm.
So why specify Gentiles in a context that predates the ministry to them anyway, according to the misguiding principles of the Christian church? All right?
Mm-hmm.
I hope everybody follows that. I hope everyone sees that. Any questions or asked? Any statements added to it?
I have, excuse me, I have one comment. We know that
Yes, ma'am.
that it's impossible that Yahusha preached to the world. We know that that's impossible because even when he showed up on the scene, he even accused Yasharel of not knowing their appointed time. Even some of Yasharel was not aware the fact that he was on the earth. So how could the world, who didn't know anything about him, be looking for him or listening to him or be preached to by him when even some of his own didn't even expect his arrival and wasn't aware of it? Not possible.
Well, that's a good point. You see that in the book of Acts alone. Mm-hmm. That's true. That's a good point. Very good point.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I said the last part 20 of this. I said, did Yahusha go up on a mountain and get a megaphone big the size of a bus and spoke to the whole world at one time? No. That's the only way he could have done it, possibly. So we know that he wasn't everywhere. He wasn't even everywhere in Judah, let alone the northern and southern nation as a whole. He couldn't have been. All right. Anybody else? So to prove that this word Gentile can't be what's being spoken of, the way it's been used, just to prove it further, this unto word I have highlighted is, again, kind of a misdirection in translation, a poor choice of words. The translator didn't have to choose it. Let's take a look at unto. Unto is simply in, and the primary use is in, by, or with. So if Gentiles really mean nation, you could say Yahusha preached in the nation. We may even say, we could say Yahusha preached by the nation. Yahusha preached with the nation. That doesn't make sense because he came for them, right? So he didn't do it with them. He came to them, in them, by them. And of course, by them also means the disciples were involved as well. Sometimes this word is used as to, but ask yourself this. Did Yahusha preach to non-Hebrews? That's what they're trying to say this Gentile word means. We know that's an absolute no as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we know he was always among his people. So, and that's John 18 and 20. He taught among his people. So that, with that being stated, there should be no doubt with this verse, 1 Timothy 3:16, that we know that within this whole verse, it's clear that the word Gentile is defined as Hebrew. This is a great example that can be given to anybody in the church to prove that Gentiles misused and misunderstood. All right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's continue. Minister White, do you mind reading 1 Timothy 5:17-18?
Yes. 1 Timothy 5:17-18. Let the elders that rule well be counted worthy of double honor, especially they who labor in the word and doctrine. For the scripture saith, Thou shalt not muzzle the ox that treadeth out the corn, and the laborer is worthy of his reward.
All right. Thank you, Minister. I'm always curious, why choose corn? I don't understand. Wheat was very common in Western Europe. Corn is native to the Americas. I don't know why they chose corn when they translated that. That word shouldn't even be here either. But that's not the focus. I want us to focus on the scripture Paul is quoting. He's quoting Torah, Deuteronomy 25:4. Thou shalt not muzzle the ox when he treadeth out the corn. He's also quoting Leviticus 19:13. Thou shalt not defraud thy neighbor, neither rob him. The wages of him that is hired shall not abide with thee all night until the morning. Why would Paul quote Torah to people who are clueless, or Timothy who's a Gentile? Now, we've already proven that Timothy is not some random guy. He can't be. We've talked about how he was raised up in the scriptures, right? We've talked about that too. So why would he say this to some random audience? So it's not the case. It's not the case. Timothy is a Hebrew, and that's the reason he's speaking to him about this stuff. He knows the Torah, because we've already talked about how Timothy was raised up in the scriptures that make you wise unto salvation. This predates the New Testament existence. There was no New Testament when Paul told Timothy this. So what scriptures make you wise unto salvation? The original text, the Old Testament, the one that the church says has no real significance anymore.
Mm.
They're literally throwing their salvation away, and they don't realize it. Now, to prove Paul really knows what he's talking about, and Paul is really talking on something that's a Hebraic in its nature. Let's look at Leviticus. Oh, is there any questions on this, by the way, or any ads? Let's look at Leviticus 19. Because neighbor says a lot, and I want people to understand the audience. When a Hebrew, like Paul, says neighbor, he's not using what we consider in the Western culture. He is talking about the Hebraic thought of neighbor. The word for neighbor, and this is from the Torah, is re'ah, and it's considered brother, companion, fellow, friend, husband, lover, neighbor. Some of that is the Western definition. You always have to be careful with Strong. But to get the true definition, all you got to do is look at the Torah Hebrew. It gets rid of any Western understanding. It goes straight to the original thought. That's the resh and ayin. So it's rai or ra. And it means a man watches over his flock. Often they are his only companion. The head is the head of the man, or the person who chooses to learn and receive salvation. This is the multi-dimensional definitions of the Hebrew language, the original Hebrew. That language, that alphabet is not like ours. It has layers. It's 4 layers deep. All right, it forms words. It has its own individual meaning, and so on. Spiritual meaning, and so on. The resh, that's why it's an image. The resh is a man. And we know that a man chooses to learn or chooses not to learn. A one that does not want to learn is considered evil. The one that chooses to learn is a man that seeks righteousness. Ayin is the fountain of wisdom, the divine light, or salvation, the source of righteousness. All right, so this is deep. This is talking about a very wise man, that he's smart enough to see the divine light or salvation. So in the eyes of Paul, the only people that could be a neighbor is someone who chooses to learn and live by the divine light. And we know what the divine light is because Scripture tells you in Proverbs 4 and 18 and Proverbs 6 and 23. And we can read it for the audience if somebody doesn't mind pulling that for me. Somebody pull Proverbs 4 and 18 and Proverbs 6 and 23. So now, this tells you, by understanding this definition, we know that neighbor can only be Hebraically understood, and that a neighbor would be one of two people, a Hebrew that believes in Torah, or someone who is sojourning with Israel who believes in Torah. But the qualifier is someone who learns and lives by the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Does anybody have Proverbs 4:18?
I do.
Yeah, I have it.
Okay.
Oh, I actually have it on my notes too. But go ahead, brother.
Go ahead,
Read it for me. All right. Sorry about that, Minister White.
Mm-hmm.
Proverbs 4 and 18. But the path of the just is, in italics, as the shining light that shines more and more unto the perfect day. All right. And Minister, do you have 6 and 23?
Yes. For the commandment is a lamp.
Please read that for me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life.
So see, here we go. You know, Paul is demonstrating his understanding of Torah and how it applies to Timothy. It is a man who chooses to live by Torah, learn Torah. You can't be a neighbor, and you want to, I'll prove to you how that's true. According to Torah, if you did not live by Torah, you were pushed out. We talked about this earlier on in the lesson series, that they didn't tolerate people who broke Torah. You were not allowed to live in the kingdom or the camp or the community. They would get rid of you. You had to be obedient. They didn't. They wouldn't have allowed you. You couldn't live next door to anyone unless you were obedient. Okay, so I wanted to point that out just to prove the point that Paul understands it. He is talking to a fellow Hebrew. So the audience is Hebrew in Timothy, and the word Gentile cannot be misappropriated here at all. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Any questions or adds?
I'd like to add some scriptural reference in case anyone in the audience is wondering where it can be found. It's a law that if you're going to sojourn with Yahusha, then you must abide. So you can find reflections of that in the book of Numbers, chapter 15, starting at verse 15. Well, let's start at verse 14. And if a stranger sojourn with you, or whosoever be among you in your generations, and will offer an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto Yahuwah, as you do, so he shall do. One ordinance shall be both for you of the congregation, and also for the stranger that sojourneth with you. An ordinance forever in your generations, as ye are, so shall the stranger be before Yahuwah. One law and one manner shall be for you and for the stranger that sojourneth with you. So if the person is not willing to abide by the rules that govern that community, they cannot be in that community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you, Minister.
Mm-hmm.
That's perfect. All right. Anybody else? All right. So let's see. Let's move to the next one. This one's a small one, so I'll go ahead and read through it. 1 Timothy 6:14. That thou keep this commandment without spot, unrebukable, until the appearing of our Adonai Yahusha Mashiach. Woo! I call this another lie by the translators. This is so misdirected. The word "this" does not belong. It's italicized. It's an assertion. The word "this" leads you to believe that Paul is referencing a single commandment or a specific commandment that he declares to Timothy alone. So there is no reference to what it really means. They're not thinking of the Torah when Paul says this. But if you read the chapter in context, which we don't do, especially in the church, they don't read context. Paul is talking about false teachers, the love of money, and verse 11 through 13 speaks of righteousness, which is being obedient, and he speaks of faith in it. And we've already defined righteousness in this lesson. So what I want to do to prove to you that that word commandment is nothing new. One, well, let's make that clear, since the church likes to try to assign a law in a book that wasn't put together until 400 years after the death of the Messiah. They like to say there's a law in this. But let me show you what this really represents. Let's move to the next slide here. We know that this does not belong, so we're going to ignore this. But commandment is entole, and it means precept, a commandment or precept. Now, a precept in the Hebraic term is mitzvah. It's the commandments of Elohim. They knew this word was precept. They knew this. The Thayer's definition says use of the commandments of the Mosaic law. How plain can you make it? Now you see why I say this is another translation, purposeful translation line. So Paul is really informing Timothy to follow after righteousness. He says that in verse 11. Keeping the Torah, the commandments of Yahuwah without spot. So if Paul is teaching this, then there is no doubt Timothy is not from some Greek nation because his Greek name is Timotheus. No. And nor did Paul teach Torah is no more. Why? Because I just proved to you he was just telling somebody to keep it. So they know what this really meant. The translators did not have to do this. All right? Anybody has any adds or questions with this?
I think we're good.
All right. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and move to the second letter of Timothy. All right? And these are shorter verses, so I'll just continue. Who is Timothy, Paul's son? We've been talking about that, and I'm adding to it. We already proved it. He calls him his son, by the way. And we've already proven that he's a Hebrew, but I'm just going to add more to that. All right? 2 Timothy 2 and 5. And if a man also strive for mastery, yet is he not crowned, except he strive what? Lawfully. You can't get this crown. Do you understand? He's not talking some random crown, by the way. He's talking about the crown that we inherit when we run this race, when we make our salvation sure, when we endure to the end. This royalty that we inherit, that's the crown. This is a serious crown. This is not no metaphor. The word lawfully is nomimos. Lawfully, agreeable to the law, agreeable to Torah. He told Timothy, you're not going to get your crown unless you strive for it within Torah. You strive for it in a way that agrees to Torah. So if he was, again, just another Hebrew, why would Paul direct Timothy to strive for a crown of mastery by being obedient to Torah? And let's say they say, okay, well, Timothy still was a Greek if they want to. All right. He still told them to keep Torah. So what you got to say about that? What you going to say now? The only twist you can put into that is to say that he really didn't teach any of the law, right? So, anybody have any questions or any adds to this?
I do.
Oh, please.
I was
Go
just
ahead.
thinking, yes, I was just thinking, why did he say you must keep the Torah to gain your crown? Why did he say eternal life? Why did he exaggerate that? Because we are a nation of kings and priests, of royalty. So in order for you to effectively take the law and apply it to the kingdom, you must first have to walk in it, to live in it, to walk out without spot or blemish in a perfected way. That is when you get your crown. That's why he said it's a crown is given to you, because authority and power is given with that position, not just eternal life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's 100%. Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am. That's right. This is, when I speak to people about the truth about Scripture, it also speaks to an identity. And when you speak to the identity, you want someone to understand really what you're telling them. I'm talking about a royalty. I'm talking about kings and queens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not an exaggeration. I'm not jumping on some boat or trying to take somebody else's crown. This is what the Scripture says. And you don't take it serious, you don't understand what you're actually getting. The church teaches away from this because they want to include the world. All the world is not in this. All the world was not given these promises. We talk about this in this lesson series. The truth is the truth, though. Thank y'all. Anybody else?
Yes, I'm sorry, one more comment. Even the heathen know that we are kings and priests. I mean, let's go back to the movie Color Purple. This is why we didn't want our names changed, because name means character and function. And we knew who we were before we were stripped of our positions, of our royalty. Our crowns were taken out, silk robes were taken, our skulls were burned. So we knew who we were. So this is why we fought for our names. So even the heathen know that we came from a nation of kings and priests.
Mm-hmm.
That's understood by people that's not even walking into or even that are atheists. That is a basic foundation of our history.
If you don't think we stand out as a people, then you're blind, willfully blind. I was talking to someone last night about the uniqueness of us, that we are all the same everywhere you go. Our behaviors, our expressions, our talents and gifts make us completely different from any other group of people in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That goes along with that royal bloodline. Isn't the royal bloodline supposed to be the best example of the people, of a population?
Mm-hmm.
When armies conquer other nations, do they take the people from the villages? No. I mean, if they want laborers in the field, but if they want the example of the best,
Mm-hmm.
they go get the king, queen, and their children. They wanted the best. Why do you think that? Let me explain to you how Western Europe knew who we were. You're telling me from Spain and Portugal, or the Dutch, or the Italians, and I can go on and on. You're telling me they had to go all the way around a continent for months of travel to get slaves? They couldn't go anywhere else. Why would they get them? They went out their way to get a specific people. So there was something different about us, what we were capable of, what we could endure, how we will endure. Something that was completely unique to anything they've had access to. If that was the case, they had populations that were large and easier to get to than coming to the regions of Southwest Africa and West Africa and working with other groups of people to kidnap people and all that nonsense. They even had they wanted to slave, but to tolerate the work on the work. Many white colonies that were startups died out in many of these Caribbean islands and West Africa. You deal with the temperatures or the viruses and so on. It was our people that did. We've been unique from the very beginning. Even the history books tell you that. All right, that's enough of my rant. I apologize. Can I make a comment, brother? Can I make a comment? Yes, sir. Well, when they removed our Father from the Bible 6,000 times, what they were doing, like Mr. Ryan, of people's names, you remove their identity, their title, their position, like Yahusha, the immerser. That's for one, for example. But First Peter 2:9 said it best, and they knew, but ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people. That's why we are set apart. That ye should show forth the praises of Him who has called you out of darkness into His wonderful, marvelous light. They knew exactly who we were. That's why the Africans helped enslave us.
Yeah,
they knew we were not of them. They said, I want royalty. They will not believe that. But that is so true. That is so true. And I want to point out something since you brought that book up, brother. I'm going to point out, because it's in this lesson. And that verse, I'm not going to call you a lesson stepper, brother, because we're a couple of lessons away from that. But if we were nothing closer or so to it, you are a lesson stepper. But I'm not qualifying you that tonight. But I want to point out something that the audience don't know about that letter that Peter wrote. Do you know that Peter wrote that very letter to the same people Paul wrote to? He just called a bunch of Gentiles royal priesthood, a peculiar people. He is literally quoting the Torah. Hebrews, I think not. And the church says there is the minister to the Hebrews, right? The Christian Hebrews, they will say. There's to the Gentile, non-Hebrew Christians, right? But that letter, if you go to the first chapter, he tells you who's the audience, and it's Turkey. And specifically, even Galatia is mentioned in his letter. The same audience as Paul. And he also says, as Paul has written to you in his letters, the same audience. So how in the world can the church... anyway, we know. We have seen it enough. And we're going, by the way, these points I'm talking about, we're going over that in this lesson series. They'll be at the end, because once we're done with Paul, we'll hop into Peter just for a little bit to prove that Peter and Paul really did have the same ministry. They just went two different directions. They weren't typically in the same place at the same time. That's all. That's all. We'll talk about that in the coming session or so. It's coming up. We got a couple more to go through with Paul. All right. Hey, brother, were you done? I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. I was just going to comment saying, if you look at the map, the earlier maps of Africa, you see that we established our own kingdom of Judah. You see that. Now, if we were welcome amongst them, use common sense. If we were welcome amongst the Africans, then why did we have to go separate ourselves and put ourselves into another spot on the continent? Why do we have to set up our own kingdom if we were welcome amongst them? Then and also, if we were welcome with them, we wouldn't have to segregate ourselves totally. That's how they knew where to go. That's just common sense wise. I wanted to point that out. Thank you. That's true. And these are observations we need to try our best to look outside the box that, or the cage, better put, that church puts you in. Step outside so you can look at things differently. That's one of the blessings about this ministry. It teaches from a perspective that's different. It is a perspective changer, this ministry. It has not changed the scripture. All I'm telling you to do is change your perspective. That's what this ministry does. That's what we're really teaching. The scriptures don't have to, I don't have to, a lot of the things I say are just extra. You just need a perspective change.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Let's go ahead and point to something else here. Let's see. 2:15. Study to show thyself approved unto Elohim, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. I've memorized this verse from many years ago. It was one of the verses I was taught to memorize. But we're taught to memorize the verse, but we don't know what the truth is. The church doesn't teach it. The truth, they'll say the truth is Genesis to Revelation, the whole book. But what we need to ask ourselves is, what was Paul referencing when he wrote this? He couldn't have referenced the whole book. It didn't exist. And as a Hebrew, he specifically is taught what truth is, not an assumption, and definitely not his letters. He would have never said his letters were included in that, because he's a Hebrew. He knows the truth. He knows what is the truth. It's not in the New Testament what he was referencing. I'm not saying the New Testament isn't full of truth. Truth, it is. But the truth Paul is referencing is found in the original text, the Old Testament as we call it. Deuteronomy 32:4. He is the rock. His word is perfect. For all his ways are judgment. And all of truth, and without iniquity. Just and right is he. Now look at that. Truth without iniquity. Truth without lawlessness. You see it? So if it's without lawlessness, then this truth must have what in it? Law. You see that? Psalms 119, 142. To me, this is the greatest Psalms book chapter in all of Psalms. It is a firecracker. Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy Torah is the truth. This is King David, right? So Timothy knew the scripture since he was a child. Timothy knew when Paul talked about the truth, he knew he was talking about Torah. So he just told Timothy to divide the Torah correctly. Teach and understand it correctly. All right? I hope that's clear to everybody. It's right there in our faces, but we don't look. We don't look. We're taught not to look. All right? But I have another verse here. Again, Psalms 119. Let's take a look at it. 119:30. I have chosen the way of truth. Thy judgments have I laid before me. King David is associating truth with judgment. You cannot have judgment without a law. Judgment is a judicial legal process. We're not taught to think this way, right? All right? So we know that this judgment is in Torah. Now, I want to point out something too. The reason I really put this in here, there is a purposeful mistranslation. look at the word of truth. Have you ever seen the word truth? Minister White,
Yes.
where in the world is this word normally called imuna?
Faith.
This Hebrew word is normally faith. Why did they make it truth here?
Mm.
The word truth here has been translated from the word imuna. Imuna is the Hebraic word for faith.
Mm-hmm.
Firmness, fidelity, steadfast, steadiness. This word is almost always, I have never seen it translated to truth until this verse. I'm bringing this out to show you the difference, the problems with some of these English translations, because they do this on purpose. Why do they change it here? I'll tell you why. Because David just showed you that faith and being lawful are required. They go hand in hand. That's the reason why they changed it. Can you imagine being a Christian church translator and you see this verse and you say, I have chosen the way of faith? Thy judgments? Oh, no. No, we ain't having that in my church. Nope. We ain't gonna have it faith. No, that ain't faith. We could say truth maybe to that, but no. If we're gonna say we saved by grace saved through grace by faith or something, I always twist that up. No, that's the reason why. It associates faith with the law.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why it's important for us, for those who really seek the truth, to change their perspective, to read it from the Hebraic perspective. So you're paying attention to culture, timeline. All right? Timeline is important because a lot of this, let me rephrase it, all of what's taught was done without a New Testament. There was no written gospel. There was no Paul's letters. There was no James and John or Peter. None of it was written. And none of it was readily available to many of the body of believers, period. It was the Gospels that were always spoken of. And it's not the Gospels that were taught about the story of Jesus. It's not simply that. No, that's what they would try to get you to teach the Gospels far more than that. And we've talked about that as well. So I hope people catch these different little things when they do their own study, like I do. I find this stuff eye-opening sometimes. All right. Anybody has anything they want to add to this as well? I do, brother Andrew. All right.
Like you said, with a purposeful mistranslation, because they knew what Imunah was. They know what faith is. They know faith is just not just belief, like the common church today will teach you. You actually faith has always been a verb, and they knew that was what his people, what Yah had taught us, and we have lived our lives as walking in Torah. Faith is a verb. It's continuous. It's not whenever you feel it's convenient, or you just pull it out your back pocket like a trump card or something. It's a way if faith changes your life and makes your walk totally different. And they knew it. They changed it on purpose.
Yeah, that's it right here. They knew it. If the way of faith includes judgments, then you better believe there's work to be done. You can't be lawful sitting on your hands saying the work is done. That's why the church teaches away from the Old Testament in many ways. Because if you really read the Old Testament, it's going to cause you to have contradictions with what the church has taught. All right. Anybody else?
I think we're good.
Yeah. Now, Minister Ronnie, are you able to read?
I am. Yes, I am.
Good, because I want you to read this next one with some enthusiasm, because it's a home run to me.
Okay. 2 Timothy 2:19. Nevertheless, the foundation of Elohim, standeth sure, having the seal Adonai anoint them that are his. And let everyone that nameth the name of Mashiach depart from iniquity.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Mr. Ronnie. Oh, if the church knew what that word meant. But you know what? You have creative calisthenics going on in the church. They're going to say, that's the law of Christ in the New Testament. And I will tell them, the New Testament wasn't written when he wrote this letter to Timothy. So what now? The word iniquity in this particular one is adikia. It's unrighteousness of the heart. The root of this word, however, is adikos. One who breaks Yah's Torah, unrighteous, sinful. It's considered lawlessness as well. He just said, nevertheless, the foundation of Elohim stands assured, having the seal. What is the seal if he says depart from lawlessness? By the way, what's the seal? It's the opposite of that. Come on, lying church. I know you see it. I see it. It's right there. Adonai knoweth them that are his. Ooh, the Torah seals you. He knows that he's the seal. And let everyone that nameth the name of Mashiach, which is Yahusha, Yahuwah who delivers, depart from lawlessness. It's right there. This is a Hebraic understanding. This is a Hebraic audience. Man, please, whoever wants to sit here and say, I have the seal of righteousness, I know his name. You better say also, I depart from lawlessness. Because what does he say? Get away from me. Depart from me. I do not know you. Why? Workers of iniquity. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter if you know his name. And I know Mr. White can get that verse from me. I think it's in Matthew 9. It doesn't matter if you know his name and you know pieces of this or that. If you are a lawbreaker, Mashiach says he's going to tell you to depart from me. I don't know you.
Matthew 7:23.
Oh, no. 7:23. 2 chapters off. 7:23.
Yes, sir.
So this proves the audience, and it proves his teachings as well. Now the church may say, well, if Timothy was a Hebrew, of course he would teach the Torah, because Torah is for the Hebrews and not for the church. Well, I've already disproven that point throughout this whole lesson series. There's no sense for me to even say nothing about that here. Because if you really want to know the audience of Paul's letters, it was never to a Gentile or non-Hebrew anyway. Pay attention. Pay attention. All right. Anybody else? Oh, see, I thought we already talked about. All right, Sister Monique. I thought we already talked about this next verse, but we did not. I apologize. I spoke of it earlier. Sister Monique, can you read 2 Timothy 3:14-15 loud and clear for us, please?
But continue thou in the things which thou hast learned and hast been assured of, knowing of whom thou hast learned them, and that from a child thou hast known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make thee wise unto salvation through faith which is in Mashiach Yeshua.
Thank you, Sister Monique. Now, I'm quickly understanding, if the audience hasn't thought of this already, that the letters to Timothy pretty much shuts the church's doctrine down. You can point out how wrong the church is, just by reading the 2 letters to Timothy. Look at this. I love verse 15. And that from a child thou hast known the holy scriptures, which are able to make thee wise unto salvation through faith, which is in Mashiach, Yahusha. What was he taught as a child? You think he was taught the book of Acts? You think Timothy was taught Romans? No. Timothy was taught the Old Testament, as we call it.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the Holy Scriptures. And not only that, he said the Holy Scriptures makes you wise unto salvation. So, when the church says our doctrine is based on the letters of Paul, are they teaching salvation? Do they truly teach salvation? When Paul has told you it's the Old Testament, the original text that makes you wise unto that. So we have to understand that Paul has made it very clear in his Timothy letters that not only is Torah required, but it's the source of your salvation. Because grace gives us space for obedience. Love allows us to execute the purpose of Torah, to obey the Torah in its fullness, in its purpose. There was nothing changed. It was always required. Always required. All right, anybody else? Or any questions? All right. I think we'll end it here. We're going to move in the next part. We'll move to the letter to Titus. So in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and end this session here. We thank you all for joining the House of Seal Ministries as we continue with the Paul letters. I hope the letters of Timothy were eye-opening. I hope what we discussed is eye-opening. I hope you can use it to grow in your understanding and remove the veil that the church has put over your eyes. Step out that cage and change your perspective. All right? We thank you all for joining us and have a great rest of your night. Shalom, everyone.
And I just wanted to remind our audience that if you have any questions about anything that you've heard here tonight or in our previous lessons, feel free to email your questions to info@houseofshiloh.org. Again, info@houseofshiloh.org. Shalom.